Hi, and welcome back to Psychology with me, Mr. Snyder. And today we're finishing up our first domain with Module 37. It's the only one in Chapter 16. It's about applied psychology and psychology careers. Now, I can't guarantee a lot of this is going to be on the test, but the fields of psychology will be, and the careers in psychology are just kind of to educate you. So let's go ahead and get started. We'll talk about the degree requirements and educational qualifications of psychologists. We'll talk about programs for further resources, so basically the APA website, careers in psychology and psychology fields, and how we address domestic and global issues. So basically, there's a couple different types of psychological professionals. First of all, if you get a master's in in psychology and social work and you become a licensed clinical social worker, you can be a psychiatric social worker. And what these people do is they focus on the environment around the person and the social conditions that may be aggravating their behavior, like poverty, stress, drug abuse, etc. They can administer psychotherapy, and they work in a clinical setting with other professionals in order to improve the person's mental health. A psychiatrist is the highest level you can achieve. They are a medical doctor, and they work in diagnosing more severe mental illnesses, and they treat psychological disorders with, they can prescribe medication. They can prescribe other medical procedures as well for solving these. They have special training in the treatment of mental disorders, and they have the biopsychological perspective on the causes and treatments of these disorders. So we can prescribe antidepressants and anti-anxiety medicine that work on a neurological level in order to solve these people's problems. And then a psychologist is a doctor that does not have a medical degree. They'll have a doctorate in philosophy, or a Ph.D. as it's known, or a doctorate in psychology, which is rather new. It's called a Psy.D. Those with masters can be called therapists or counselors, teachers, or researchers. Some states and the laws are very, very sketchy. They're not sketchy, they're very careful about who you can call a psychologist. And so you can't call yourself a psychologist if you only have a master's in most states. These people cannot prescribe medications or any medical treatments because they are not doctors. Some use counseling or therapy and other newer approaches and techniques to provide treatment to mental disorders. So we talked about that PhD versus a Psy.D. What's the difference? The PhD is the highest degree of learning in any subject area. You can become a PhD and have a doctorate in education, medicine, lots of different things. It's more research oriented. You'll find a lot of these people at universities doing research on people. It requires a master's degree plus coursework and dissertation in order to get your doctorate. The Psy.D is a little more newer, and it requires less research and less coursework, but it has more emphasis on applying psychology to a practical application. I just worked with a lady who had a Psy.D down at Riley's in Indianapolis, the children's hospital for my son. He had to take a test, and it was a Psy.D who administered it. So it requires academic coursework and a large-scale term paper to get a Psy.D, and it requires a participation in a practicum, or like you have to go out and basically an internship. You have to take a doctor's do a residency. You have to have practice in it before you can become a Psy.D. And what can you do with a master's degree in psychology? You can work under the supervision of a doctoral psychologist, and you can also become therapists, counselors, licensed clinical social workers, but notice you cannot call yourself a psychologist. And you can also serve as a school counselor at various levels. And a bachelor's degree kind of limits you even more. You can work in health-related or social fields and possibly other careers like marketing or a social worker, but you're even more limited. So master's degree is kind of the way to go, or if you want to go all the way to get to your doctorate, then you have the most options available. What are the areas of specialization here in psychology? Well, we're going to go through these very quickly, just for the sake of time, but I'll go through them all. Clinical is the most important, and it's the most most psychologists work in clinical. So it's similar to psychiatry because they treat medical illness or mental illness. This is you come in, you lay on the couch, you talk about your feelings, and they may prescribe you something. It's the diagnostic and treatment of psychological disorders. The psychologist in a clinical psychology cannot prescribe the drug or medical therapies, but they do listen and administer tests and try to get explanations or predictions on why the person's behaving this way, and we can direct help from there. So psychologists who work in clinical psychology can not prescribe medicine. A psychiatrist can. Counseling is more or less severe. It's less severe forms of mental illness. So think of a clinical psychologist working with people with schizophrenia. People with a counseling psychologist may work on adjustment issues. Your parents got divorced. You need to go see a counseling psychologist. You're having problems fitting into college. You may need to go see a counseling psychologist. You're having problems adjusting to work. It's basically adjustment issues in your life, but no real mental illness. You can go see a counseling psychologist. Developmental psychology focuses on the change from birth or conception through death. They're interested in how the way people think, how they relate to others, and how people change over their entire span of life. You'll find these people in academic settings and various fields of research. Experimental psychology do experiments on people. They do different areas in learning, memory, thinking, perception, motivation, and language. You'll see them working in academic settings in large universities. Social psychology studies the effects of groups on an individual in areas like prejudice, how people's attitudes are changed and formed, aggression, interpersonal attraction between men and women. Social psychologists work in these academic settings and also federal agencies and big business, maybe marketing or something like that, how we can practically apply the research that they're doing. Personality psychology, believe it or not, focuses on personality differences in people. Talks about the differences in nature versus nurture effect on personality. So is your personality an effect of your biology, or is it because of the environment you were raised in? It's a little bit of both, actually, and we're trying to determine the differences there. Development of personality, how does it develop over time? These people work in academic settings. Physiological psychology, also be called behavioral neuroscience or biopsychology. They focus on the biological basis of behavior. So they'll study your brain, your nervous system, and the interaction of your body's chemicals like hormones and neurotransmitters on human behavior, and how do the effects of certain drug prescriptions affect human behavior. For example, schizophrenia. We're still trying to find a good medicine to help control schizophrenia for most people, and how does it work? What do we need to develop a medicine to do in order to prevent schizophrenia or limit it? And academic settings is where you'll find these people. Neuropsychology focuses on the relationship between the brain systems and behavior. They're focused on the assessment and diagnosis of behavior, and they can also treat people through this way. Comparative psychology focuses on animal behavior versus human behavior, basically comparing them, contrasting them. It sounds like kind of a fun job. They work in animal laboratories and universities and even research the animal's natural habitat using a naturalistic observation. And it can also do some research designed to find solutions to practical problems, maybe by looking at how animals do it. So here are some resources if any of those things sound interesting to you. The APA has a great section on the studying of psychology for high school students, undergraduate, and college, and books. Here are some books that are recommended to you if you are interested. You could also talk to me. You could talk to your counselors, look up schools that have good psychological programs. There's plenty of different ways in order to get more information about it if it could be a possible career for you. Now we're going to speed through these because these are the careers in psychology and psychological related fields. Okay, these probably won't be on the test. The subfields that we just went over will be. These will be more like just for your information. Psychology and health, basically stress reactions, how that adjusts or affects a person's physical health in order to improve and maintain good health. Also deals with stress management. Psychology and education. An educational psychologist basically works to study how people learn and to develop methods and materials to aid that learning. School psychology is not the same. Most districts have a school psychologist. Carroll and Northwest Allen have a school psychologist, maybe two. And basically they apply those educational psychologist research to an individual school system. They will work directly with the children and possibly conduct tests as needed to diagnose children's problems. Psychology in sports helps athletes prepare mentally, how they can get to a superior physical performance, and prepare the mind for success in sports. Psychology in the military, we can assess, teach, manage, research, provide mental health services to military personnel. Basically, how do we apply these psychological skills to human issues in the military? Psychology in the law, a forensic psychologist is one that examines criminal evidence and aids law enforcement investigations into criminal activities. So these people work in the justice system as police psychologists or jury experts. It basically focuses on criminal behavior in consultation with attorneys or other agents of the court system. It can also, someone in criminal psychology can also talk about how to identify a credible witness, how to randomly select jury. There's a lot of different applications for psychology in law. Psychology in the community. Basically, a community psychologist works in the promotion of mental and physical health, focuses on the individuals and their community, basically how a community affects a person's health, mental health, and addressing societal issues. Environmental psychologists can work, basically focuses on human behavior and how it affects the environment. But not necessarily the environment, but the environment that they're in, like an office, store, school, dormitory, hospital. They can help plan. They can become an urban or city planner because they can focus on human behavior and then use that to design the most efficient buildings, parks, plants, power plant, like plants, not plants, but plants. That didn't make sense. I'm sorry, it's late. IO psychology, or industrial organizational, is actually the fastest growing section, and it basically focuses on how to get the most efficiency out of people at work. It deals with stuff like personnel selection, the administering of job performance assessments, work schedules, work areas. You're going to have an open floor plan or you're going to have cubicles, which is more efficient. And then some of the most interesting psychology people, I think, are human factor engineers. Basically, this is a specific kind of IO psychology which focuses on designing machines, furniture, and other devices that people use so that those devices are the most practical, comfortable, logical, easy to use. I mean, think of the phones that you guys use. Somebody had to design those and design easy ways for humans to swipe and pinch and whatever the opposite of pinch is called. And so human factor psychologists, they study the way humans and machines interact with each other, and engineer is somebody who would actually design the equipment to use. Here are some other things that people in IO psychology would do if they're in an industry or if they're in an organization. And that is all I have for you today. Hopefully one of these sparked your interest. Maybe you want to research it as a possible career later on. But that's all I have for you tonight, and I will see you.